really excited to share my most recent craft project. I worked for basically 3 days on painting a dresser, and this idea has kind of been percolating for like 2 months, and eventually I landed at trying to paint my very much dumbed down version of water lilies, the Monet series, which is my absolute favorite art thing ever. I watched some videos on YouTube, found a couple of good ones, and I did some practice, and those didn't turn out that great, so I sort of paused the project for a bit. Eventually I was like, okay, let's just go for it. If it's terrible, we'll paint back over it. The worst thing that happens is it's just bad, and then you move on or you scrap the project. So I went for it. At first I was worried that it was really gonna look terrible, but I just kept going, and I eventually changed up my idea for the design. At first I thought I was gonna do this like tree scene. Eventually I ended up on picking one specific painting as an inspiration. For that I had been trying to kind of mix bits and pieces of other paintings that I had as reference. I was like, I'm gonna focus on one, and I sort of divided up the one picture into 3 panels and cut that across the 3 sides. And then for the top I just did whatever. And I'm really excited about how it turned out. So I wanted to make a little video of the time lapse of me making it, because I just wanted to see it come together. I think watching time lapses are so fun. So this is that.
To start, I focused on just getting a layer of paint down because I knew that having layers and layers was going to be an important part of the technique, so I didn't really worry at all about having any specific texture. Then I started to work on a tree because I thought that having a willow was going to be a really great focal point and center, but I eventually decided to scrap that. And then once I had that done, I worked on a first round of texturing on the front. I decided to make the tree bigger and darker, and then I went to the side while that dried. And this side took forever because I did not have big enough paintbrushes, but I just wanted to get a layer of paint on. Once I had that, I started working on some texturing, and I wasn't really that happy with this at this point because I felt there were too many different colors that weren't mixing, and it was just kind of blocky. So I let it dry and started thinking about sketching more of the tree before I eventually decided that that was going to be way too complicated. So I went back to the side, I tried a sponge tool and then another sponge tool to get a better texturing, and eventually I found something I was happier with. But pretty much every side eventually needed 4 or 5 coats of paint because you really needed that to get the layers effect. I started adding some lilies, and it started to take more of a shape once I had a specific picture to reference. And then I worked on the other side. This side looked a little rough for a while, but after enough layers and I got a little bit more comfortable mixing the paints, I felt like it started to take more of a shape and look a little bit more recognizable. Then the big thing was to take over the front and change it. I was really stressed about this part, but I knew that once I had this specific vision in mind, it was going to be a good change. So this took a while to redo, but I was really happy with it and glad that I was able to get so many mixes of colors, and I was pretty happy with how it looked overall. Then once I had addressed all the sides, I worked on the top where I had no real plan in mind at all, other than knowing that I wanted to have a bunch of different colors. So I did one layer, I did the dresser drawer supports, and then I went back to the top to add more texturing and make it a little bit more interesting. And then once I had all of this paint drying, I did a ceiling cover over the whole dresser, and then I did a rough scuff. I wiped it with a tack cloth to get the dust, did a ceiling again, and I repeated that 3 times before I got to my finished product, which is now sealed, so it will be protected and it shouldn't scuff or chip at all.